So I would like to call the August 7th meeting of the Hinesburg Development Review Board to order. So I think the first item is agenda changes, and I think we have a biggie.
Actually, no changes. I mean, just
Mitch, I often can't hear you, and tonight's
just a little bit of an oddity.
Okay.
A little bit of an oddity that the applicant for Hannaford's asked for a continuance on May 4th, which, I mean, it's up to the board to, to act on that, but doesn't mean we necessarily can't have that particular hearing.
We'll still act on it.
I mean, this,
Yeah.
a few hours ago.
They didn't send it to me.
I don't.
We've got our experts here.
I would say, I mean, this is up to the board, up to you, but I would recommend let them testify, let them talk.
Yeah, Jim, I'm shocked the applicant is not here, but I have no intention of voting in favor of not hearing any evidence that anybody wants to hear. And they ignore it or not hear it at their peril.
So
If you want to go for it, great, but I expect they're going to say, oh, they want another bite at the apple. So
No, I don't think anybody here is of that mind.
And I just want to also add that, I mean, you have VCAM, so if anything that's said here would be reviewable by anybody, by VCAM, if not that watching right this moment, or by watching in a couple of days when it gets online. So, I mean, it's up.
they're going to come back and say, we've got a whole new this or that. We're going to have to go through this all over again.
That possibly is what's going to happen.
All right. So
But then again-
the intention is that we were going to continue anyway, so that after they had a chance to present today, people could mull it over and think about it and then come back in the next meeting. So it's being asked to be continued. Everybody showed up.
We were told they were getting the materials in plenty of time in advance of this meeting so that our experts could read it, respond to it, and we did that, and our experts submitted their reports, and now they're not here, they're not making their presentation, and they're planning to come back again.
We're equally frustrated, okay?
What I'm going to suggest is if they want to come back again, that you issue an order that's conditioned upon paying us back for all the time our experts spent to prepare for the hearing tonight.
That's beyond our power, as you know.
This was scheduled for a hearing today. They chose not to show up. Unilateral.
Jim will take that.
Okay.
So let's move on to...
There's no agenda changes that I would propose.
Okay. I figured an applicant not showing up would be a significant change to what the plans were. So maybe it's not technically an agenda change, but we will continue to discuss it. We're not going to not discuss it today. So let's move on to the minutes. If the board would take a look at them and let us know if there's any issues.
I had a few comments on it.
Okay, so I did see the draft Doc X, or I'm assuming TC was track change.
Yep.
I looked at that, and I didn't really see any track changes. I saw dates and street addresses and stuff underlined, but...
Yeah, a couple of very small things. Let's see, on page 2, the paragraph that starts with Sarah M., there was a little, the turnaround, I just needed a hyphen. Just a hyphen that was needed on that. On page 3, where we say Dennis P. open discussion to the public, we really should just mention that there was no public comment. The sentence, the paragraph afterwards, it should say, Mitchell C. answered, it is in the rural residential 1 zoning district. And the paragraph after that, there was 1 dissenting vote, so it should be 6-1.
Yes.
And on page 4, in the 3rd paragraph, now Frost has 6 employees. Actually, what I wrote down there is not correct. So there would be...
Addressing the microphone.
Yes, so there would be adequate parking for a food truck, it should say.
Okay.
And on page 5, last sentence of the second paragraph, the board approving extra seating would not require them to have those seats until they wish to. That's basically what was said there. And there was kind of a half sentence at the bottom of page 5, next meeting, said Hannaford will present traffic info at next meeting, and Ralph K. won't be there. So just I took out that last part. And I had an edit also on the last page that just clarified the sentence. A training session on the new regulations is tentatively scheduled for 8/21/18. So those are basically the changes. I didn't have it, since I was away for 2 weeks, I didn't have a chance to do my pre-review on the minutes.
I'm having trouble hearing anything you're saying. We do have air conditioning. I'm wondering if we might be better off turning off any air conditioning that may be on,
All
or
right, can you hear me now?
fans, and opening windows.
I thought you
It's
could
not
hear me.
that
Can you hear me better now?
I can hear you much better now.
Okay. If you want, I can go through them again, or...
No, please.
Did you see what I wrote down on the...
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I have two things. One being on page 4, keep parking on the pavement. I've changed that to gravel lot because it's not paved. Page 5, where it says Christina F. agreed that they should have more seats in general. She was concerned about getting seats, as it would be a bigger issue to get permitting from other regulatory bodies instead of just get from other bodies. Mitch C. said the board approving extra seating would then not limit Frost from getting them from other regulatory bodies. Clarification. That's it. I can just give you this. I'll just give this to you.
I did have one thing, if I can find it again. Page 2, and it's more, I asked the board to patch in their memories. So the second to last, well, this is in the PDF, the second to last paragraph, where it says Dick J. asked if the well will be shared by the town. The last sentence is, we put in a new well because the existing well wasn't in compliance with solid waste permit. I didn't think it was solid waste permit. I thought it was because it was not in compliance with CSWD's own regulations for the spacing of a drop-off center to the well.
No, it's PNR's regulations that the drop-off centers have to comply with.
Okay. Then no change. All right. Is there any?
Move to approve as amended.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All right. So let's. So since we don't have an applicant to walk us through what they were going to discuss, I guess we'll just open the floor to.
Maybe just for the record, either Dick, you or Alex or Mitch could explain what happened in the last 24, 48 hours to disrupt some people's expectations about tonight's meeting.
Good to do that. So this meeting of the Hannaford project was continued from the June 5th meeting, I believe. And the understanding was that Hannaford was going to supply us additional submittals to address questions that the board had. They submitted some supplemental materials in early July, but they didn't submit their additional traffic issue submittals until the end of the month, about the 26th, I think. So the other interested parties did their due diligence and submitted some additional materials based on that.
Jonathan Slason, one of your board members, knew that he wasn't going to be able to be here tonight, and so he drafted his own questions and suggestions and sent them to Mitch and myself. They were substantive and very detailed, and so we asked him if it would be okay to share those in writing with the applicant, other interested parties, and the rest of the board. He said that would be fine. So we did that, and we just did that yesterday. That's when we talked to him. So Hannaford's representative called us today.
When did the applicant submit the traffic materials that Jonathan was
The
responding
26th,
to?
so that would have been last week.
26th of July?
July, yes, just last week.
So within a week or less, John replied.
Yeah, in a matter of days, actually. I think he knew he was going to be absent, and he felt bad about that, and so he spent some time over the weekend reviewing everything and getting his thoughts together and putting them in writing. So the upshot is Hannaford's representative called us today and said, listen, there's a lot of very substantive stuff in here. We would like to address it, and we don't think it makes sense for us to address it halfway tonight and then the rest of the way at a future meeting. We'd prefer if we just continued this to a future meeting so we can address it all at once. We encourage them to come anyway, as there are other issues to discuss and there are other interested parties who'd probably like to present testimony, and they said they'd rather not. And so they've requested a continuance to September 4th, which we support, but we did tell them, you know, the meeting is going to go forward. There's going to be discussion of perhaps traffic and other issues.
So we will have to strongly encourage them to watch the VCAM to be able to address any. So if questions are asked today, they're obviously not getting answered today. So we'll put stuff on the record, but they will have to review the VCAM in order to respond to any questions or whatever that comes up, or rebuttal to any and ask for an opinion.
Mitch and I will work directly with them too to forward any additional concerns or questions or requests that the board has beyond what Jonathan put on the, put in writing. And to the extent that you as a full board want to speak to some of the issues that Jonathan brought up, that would be helpful too. Because we did tell Hannaford at the time, we said, listen, these are comments from a single board member. They don't represent the opinion of the board as a whole. But we also indicated that, Jonathan is our traffic expert on the board. This is what he does for a living, and we figured those comments were valuable. So anyways, yes, we will encourage them to do both. Watch the VCAM and take some pointers from us on what was discussed tonight and what they need to work on in advance. They did say, just so you understand, they did say that they felt that the September 4th meeting would give them time to address the comments that Jonathan brought up in a timely enough fashion that the other interested parties could respond ahead of the September 4th meeting. Hopefully, at least in my mind, that means we should get some additional submittals from them, not the week before the meeting, but at least a couple weeks before the meeting. We will work with them on that as well.
Okay.
In that regard, I know that some people in the audience may be disappointed that they're not going to engage with the applicant tonight, and I will try and make myself clear and loud too. The consequences of the applicant's late request to continue this and their non-appearance tonight, to my mind, are issues that we as a board can deal with going forward. I don't think it should interfere with anything we do tonight.
Okay. So I guess my suggestion would be that the experts that have come here today to do their presentations can go first, and then we would open the floor to the public for any comments that they like to give. So you're free to choose whoever you want to go first.
And so one point for everyone to know, we don't have our wireless mic tonight, and so in order to be heard, you need to be at the table in front of that mic. Jim, if you would, please.
Ask our stormwater expert, so Chorizo, to come up. I don't understand why Hannaford is not here There's no new information from any board member about stormwater.
Jim, we're going to deal with that going forward. Let's
Okay,
just move
Mr.
forward
Perico,
tonight.
Join us.
Good evening. So I'm prepared to give you the summary of my letter. I did prepare a letter, which I assume you did receive. I'm just happy to answer questions, however the board would like to proceed on it. Sure, so my name's Andres Terizo, and I'm with Watershed Consulting. And I was asked to review a letter that was prepared by the applicant, dated, I guess, June 13th, with regards to stormwater permitting design of the project, and specifically compliance with the latest current stormwater management manual, which is 2017 manual.
I think you would be most helpful to me as one board member here. I know you testified previously, and I think your testimony was powerful and caught a lot of people's ears. Without repeating all of that, if there are high points in your written submission that you think both not us and the public who may not have studied the written documents as closely as we would like to hear, I think this would be a great opportunity for you to do that.
Sure. Yeah, I guess just to go through, some of the high points, as you were saying, one of the high points, I guess, is in the current stormwater manual, one of the big changes is that the grass channel is no longer an acceptable practice to meet the water quality requirements. And that's important because the project does rely on a grass channel to meet the water quality standard and also the recharge requirement. And so now that the grass channel is no longer acceptable, there's really no, within the current design, there's no means to meet the water quality standard or the groundwater recharge standard. And so in the applicant's letter, they describe, potentially being able to use some of these proprietary ADS structures to meet that standard. However, those are not also approved in the manual. And there's a process to get those approved, but those are, they're not specifically listed in the manual. And, those are really pre-treatment devices. They're not generally used for, to provide the full water quality benefit, because essentially they're just ways to settle and trap sediment, but the pollutants which are in the dissolved form, which there's quite a few pollutants that are in the dissolved form, pass right through the system. So as it stands right now, I don't believe the system is capable of meeting the water quality standard. And I guess in terms of the groundwater recharge, now that the grass channel is no longer acceptable, there is no means to recharge groundwater. And, looking at this a little more closely, there's really no waiver that I see at all for the groundwater recharge standard, I think, site-wide. And in the applicant's letter, I think they were inferring that they may be trying to seek a waiver of that standard. However, the standard is only waived by when the soils are mapped as the NRCS as soil group D, which is poor soils. And if the soils are mapped as D, then you are waived very clearly in the new manual for the recharge standard. Half the site, or approximately, is mapped as C. The other half is mapped as a B/D. So what that means is that there's sandy soil material on the top, and then there's a high groundwater table, which would give it that D characterization. However, it's not just strictly mapped as D. And so I think the effect is that in the areas mapped as C and also these areas mapped as B/D, there is recharge occurring on the site. So what that means is that when you pave over the site, you have to compensate for that somehow. So I don't see a waiver of that standard at all. So again, there's nothing within the current design that meets that standard. So I think the third highlight is related to the flooding standards, which are the overbank flood protection standard and the extreme flood protection standard. The overbank flood protection standard is specific to the 10-year storm. And, you know, I did testify to this effect in the last hearing. The applicants, by their own modeling, they're increasing the peak discharge associated with the 10-year storm at the discharge point where the water flow would enter Patrick Brook. And the new manual actually tightens up that standard quite a bit in that you're only allowed for 0.31% of an increase in peak discharge when you have a small site in comparison to the greater watershed. And by my calculation, they're about 4%. So they're well over the 0.31% allowable increase. And so what that means is that there's not enough control being provided by the system in terms of the detention. There's a need for more storage in the system to meet that standard. And related to the extreme flood protection standard, the current manual speaks to the cases where there is a known flooding condition. The secretary can impose this requirement. So this requirement really only comes into play with larger projects when you're creating 10 acres or more of impervious surface. However, there's some very specific language in there where they speak to the fact if there is a known flooding condition, that's a different story, and this standard should be applied. And I think this is the exact case where you should apply this standard. The previous hydrologic study at the culvert, at Route 116 culvert, showed that the pipe can't even pass a 50-year storm event. So that's a deficient situation already. And so by increasing flows, the 100-year storm, that's going to exacerbate that problem. So I think that, this is exactly the kind of situation where there should be a 100-year control standard so that you're not, worsening a known condition. So I guess that's really the summary, I think, of the highlights.
Just to be clear, the grass swale you're talking about is where the discharge point is over by Tailhook and the mobile station?
The east-west swale, the one that wraps around Dark Star property.
Oh, the one on the Dark Star property.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I think that the treatment, the swale that Hannaford's proposing is on the property, and it's an east-west swale.
Correct.
The one you're thinking of is the discharge point where it enters into sort of an informal detention area near the gas station, between the gas station and Tailhook Towing.
Okay.
And I know that was their discrepancy as far as what counted as leaving the property, right? That they were saying if it's only more that it's going into Patrick Brook because they're correcting a situation by putting in the culvert that's the correct size, and by doing that, they're increasing the discharge. But if you go by the fact of the one that's actually at the edge of the property.
Yeah, I believe Mr. Terrizzo and the applicant had some disagreement about where the discharge should be measured at the ultimate discharge point, which is what you had indicated, or just at the boundary of lot 15.
Can you kind of speak to why you feel like it's important that it's measured at the discharge endpoint?
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, it's clear to me that when you read the guidance in the manual, you always have to include everything. You have to basically include in your modeling everything that would be changing in terms of the site. I mean, the site is not only the impervious surfaces; it's all the graded slopes. It's the changes in the hydrology and the routing of the water flow, as well as the creation of the impervious surface that results in stormwater impact. And so, a proper analysis has to include all those things. And when you're just measuring right at this point, you're not taking into account all of the impacts. And so you have to carry that analysis down to the discharge point in order to understand. So that's that's why you see those impacts at the discharge point, because, that's considering all these, changes which are occurring.
Because that east-west swale isn't treating much of the water of the site, is it?
Well, it was proposed, the east-west swale was proposed after detention in the chambers. It was proposed to then provide the water quality treatment from the project. And, this was the main water quality feature. Now that is no longer approved, there is no acceptable water quality or / recharge feature on the site. I'm sorry?
Or at least one that has been proposed.
Mitch, I did not hear a word you said.
Can you hear me now? At least one that, they haven't actually proposed one. That was what was there before. Hypothetically, they could possibly do some other things, but they have not proposed to replace that.
That actually brings to mind a question that I had for the applicant, because at one point during previous discussions, they had talked about that swale as a water quality feature, but then it also, I thought I heard that they were talking about the channel that was going to run along Dark Star. There was some question about whether or not that would be used. And if they didn't use that, then it wasn't clear to me how that, they were talking about, we would use the pipe that goes down the road by the bank, and in which case there's no treatment. So if they're listening on VCAM, that would be a question that I would like them to come back with. It's like, if that Dark Star swale is not used because of disagreement with Dark Star or whatever the reason being, that where is the water discharging, and then what is the treatment plan? Because it doesn't seem like it would be going through that east-west swale at all, even if it were a proper and allowed feature.
Under the 2002 regulations, there was possibilities using those swales for water quality treatment, but the rules have changed, and again, there's some things they could possibly do, but they have not proposed doing it.
Dick, I think that the simple answer to your question is they must and do rely on the swale next to Dark Star. There is no way for this project to work if they don't have access to that for conveyance of water. Okay. They're not using it for meeting the water quality treatment standard. It's not where they're treating stormwater. That's happening in this east-west swale. But you're absolutely right. Water from the east-west swale proceeds to that north-south swale next to Dark Star, and they have to have access to it.
Can you talk a little bit more about what the existing, you were like the existing alternative systems, you kind of talked really fast and that was.
So, and as a part of the detention chambers that are underground here, around in the parking lot, there's two different features. One is a tank, and the other is basically some of those chamber rows are wrapped in fabric. And so the water flow runs off and it settles in a tank. You imagine just a tank full of water, so it's a way for the storm water to come in and then the particles settle out. Oil water separator as well, I believe, is in there to kind of trap some of the hydrocarbons. And then that water moves on, and when it goes into the chambers, it first passes through a fabric, like you imagine like a landscape fabric. So one of those rows is wrapped in landscape fabric. And, both of those techniques are good for kind of this initial first pre-treatment, basically a way to get kind of the solids out of the stormwater before you actually apply the treatment. But, they're used where you can then infiltrate the water into the ground or otherwise filter the water through some other type of media. They're not primary treatment because you're just not getting the things that are dissolved. The phosphorus that's dissolved in the stormwater is just going to pass through those systems. And so that's why they're not accepted as primary treatment. So you often see these, you see them as like the first way to kind of remove the trash and all that stuff, but not, you don't rely on them for exclusively just for the whole treatment.
So anybody can correct me if I'm mistaken. I thought the tanks were basically open bottoms so that the water could infiltrate back into the ground through the bottom of the tank.
The tank, I think, my understanding is the tank is closed. The chambers are open bottom.
Okay.
However, they're not being relied on for any type of infiltration. Because
Okay.
of the groundwater. I mean, they're not, the only feature that was claimed for infiltration, and that's to meet the, excuse me, the recharge standard, was the grass swale, the grass channel.
So when they speak of that there's maybe a way to make the alternative systems work, they're speaking of a way to make these underground tanks do the work of the swale? That's what,
That's
we
what I
think.
gather
Yeah,
from
that's
the
what-
applicant's
okay.
letter, yes.
they're not here to say differently, so that's what we think.
Yep.
Okay.
Correct.
So I guess not a question for you, but another comment for the applicant when they come up would be, I think Mitch raised the question way back maybe May or June about if that area has a high water table, why wouldn't those tanks just sit half full of water all the time? And so I would like to hear why they think, are they pumped out? Is it gravitational that it draws the water out, or so?
The comments that I had on that were, one, a portion of the area they're using for storage is below the elevation of the invert discharging the stormwater in those tanks. And being that there is a groundwater situation, which, forgive me, I forget the name of the hydrologist that you had here who did extensive testimony talking about the groundwater situation. Thank you. Steve, what's the last name? Ravel. Basically said that there's going to be a lot of groundwater, and we know just simply from the existing conditions that there's a lot of groundwater that is coming through that system, and those tanks are going to, the underground storage areas are going to pick up a lot of that groundwater. So basically my comments were that, one, you've got an area that you're using, that you're suggesting starts off as an empty, open void that is going to start off being filled with water, which means that the storage capacity isn't what it actually says it happens to be. And secondly, you have a groundwater situation which further compromises the ability. Using, this might be a moot point, but using the 2002 standards, they were to try to meet, using the grass channel, the water quality recharge standards using the grass swale. They had to modify an orifice, which again further reduces the capacity of that underground storage system. So there's some real issues and concerns regarding the size of those underground storage systems. I mean, in addition to the things that you mentioned.
Right, thank you. So any other questions from the board for?
Not for me.
Sure.
Do you have experience with state stormwater permitting? It seems like you do, but I mean, as representing applicants, helping them through the process?
I do, I've done hundreds of them. Yeah.
There's been some concerns raised about this project adding additional impervious surface on the roadways themselves. Commerce Street, for example, is supposed to be widened to add for additional turn lane. Route 116 is going to be modified in a similar way, maybe not as much pavement. In your experience, do applicants typically take those impervious surface changes into consideration in their stormwater planning, or do they just get to ignore that if it's not on their site and not part of, within the state road system or a town road system?
Well, I can't, there's no simple answer to that question, I guess. I think it would be a site-specific type of determination. I mean, the state there's clear, not really clear, but there's direction for common plan of development where, say, like you're building an access specifically for a certain project. And I think in situations like that, you know, even if the access project alone wouldn't trigger the jurisdictional threshold to require a permit, you may actually require the permit anyway because you're linked to this larger common plan of development. And
Well,
so there are situations
So let me
like
be
that.
specific. In this case, since you're very familiar with the Hannaford application, do you feel like we're missing something by the analysis not taking into consideration additional impervious surface along the roadways? Or have you not looked at it enough to know if it's maybe a negligible amount or?
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't really considered that issue, so I would have to.
It's just a
Probably
concern
look
that I
into
heard raised either by other members of the public or perhaps by Mr. Dumont. I've forgotten exactly where I got that from, but I thought, well, that makes sense, and why wouldn't that be considered? And in fact, in this case, the stormwater permit that this project has acquired that's under appeal is a specific permit that sort of sits within an existing permit for Commerce Park. And the system that they're utilizing is part of a previously permitted system. So the
Yes.
improvements to Commerce Street are changes to the stormwater system that this project sits within. It
Well, they
seems-
are,
Seems
and-
relevant, in other words.
Yeah, I mean, related to Commerce Street, I think definitely there's a common plan. It's a common plan of development, certainly. And, you know, one of the things to keep in mind is that regardless of where the impervious surface is, I mean, there's issues in the watershed related to the water quality, and there's also issues related to the capacity at the culvert. So
Right.
even these incremental changes, you know, they really do need to be managed because, you know, when you're adding up all these incremental changes, the fact is, you know, that the culvert there is deficient.
Right,
And
we
it's going to worsen
know-
that issue.
We know this is an area that experiences flooding, and the site plan standard that talks about proper solutions for poorly drained areas, I mean, this is one of those areas, from just everyone's knowledge of what happens during a big rainstorm on Commerce Street. So, thanks.
Do you have an opinion on the adequacy of the discharge point that, I guess, discharges way more than just this part of the Commerce Park?
Adequacy in terms of the condition it's in, or?
No, how well it performs what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, I can't really offer that. I haven't actually physically looked at that in quite a while. You know, it's been a couple of years that I've actually walked to that point of discharge, so I don't really know the condition that it's in currently, so I can't really say.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Before.
which I guess is not proposed to have anything done to it, right?
That was my understanding.
Except if you've had some water.
So I guess if there's no other questions from the board before you step down, I just thought I'd ask the public if they had any questions for Mr. Trezo that he might be able to answer directly. We'll open it up to general public later. So, looks like a no.
Thanks.
So, thank you very
All
much.
right, thank you.
So, procedure, what's going on now, Jim?
These are our two transactions.
That raises a point for me. To my mind, the applicant was on clear notice that stormwater issues were going to be discussed tonight. They had their, the objectors had their expert here tonight. The applicant chose not to attend or present any evidence. To my mind, I am going to be unwilling to entertain any evidence that the applicant may wish to submit in response to stormwater, because that issue is fully teed up, and they chose not to attend or participate, and to my mind, I'm just going to shut it down. Traffic is another issue in light of Jonathan Slason's submission, which everybody received. And I just wonder if it makes sense for the applicant to go forward on traffic tonight unless you're able to respond fully to what Jonathan said, or whether it makes more sense, since to my mind, I think the applicant has to be given an opportunity with respect to traffic to respond to those comments, for you to have an opportunity to respond to their response. I guess my question is, do you want to be here once or twice?
We're here once, and we'll probably be here again.
Yeah, but you may be back here another time, so I'm happy to hear you out. Is it the most efficient use of your resources?
One of the concerns that I have is that, I'm
Or
sorry.
at least a little more between you.
And I'm just speaking for myself. I may be in a
Yes, my name is
abject
Michael
minority
Oman.
on this
Yes.
board on this point, but
Yes, I was just about to do that. My name is Michael Oman. I'm principal of Oman Analytics and one of the consultants on this project with respect to traffic. Obviously, we came prepared to speak to the work that we had done, and we feel that it's helpful. My only real concern is that we're speaking to work that the applicant had done prior to this, and we don't know what's going to be coming in, whether we're going to be basically starting all over again or what with respect to that. But my own sense is we would defer to the board any way we could assist or help, or any questions. If it would be helpful to go through the work that we have done, I think we'd be glad to do it. We're here, and otherwise, as you see fit.
Personally, fine to hear you out. Again, you're here. Two, going through it might help us, form some questions, or something else to consider that we wouldn't get by just trying to read through it and understand it. So I'm happy to hear you out.
My name is John Bruno, and I've been doing traffic engineering for 50 years or so. And since the May 15th DRB hearing, Roger Dickinson prepared a technical memorandum subject to supplemental traffic analysis for Hannaford and Hinesburg DRB. And we also submitted a detailed response to that to the board, some 13 pages, which I believe you have. And tonight we'll just summarize the important points of that. And for more detail, you can refer to that submission. I think as DRB members, as well as Hinesburg residents, are aware of the daily congestion and extensive queues along Route 116 during peak hours. Traffic counts show that not only the 1 hour period that occurs before, actually for approximately 3 hours, that peak period entails. Hannaford's own traffic consultant shows that the system is already close to failure, and if analyzed correctly, may already be in failure, as indicated by extensive queues and identified high crash location. With regards to the technical memorandum, I don't know whether it was his intent or not to have this as a traffic impact analysis, but his report or memorandum lacks a number of things that would actually result in it being a complete traffic impact analysis, according to the guidelines, the VTrans guidelines. There are no traffic diagrams showing the traffic volumes and distribution for the analyzed intersections and for the no build and build conditions for the analysis years. The complete analysis computations for the level of service analysis and queue analysis are not provided. A detailed analysis of any proposed mitigation is not included. The updated traffic impact analysis does not address the safety issues of the identified high crash locations along Vermont Route 116 that will be directly affected by the Hannaford project. There has been no truck turning analysis provided at the Route 116 intersection with Commerce Street, which is actually going to be providing the major access to Hannaford's, or within the parking lot or the Hannaford access. No plans or computations have been provided regarding any design changes to Vermont Route 116, particularly the southbound left turn lane. Lacking this information, it is not possible to do a complete and comprehensive evaluation of the traffic impacts from the proposed Hannaford project. Comments on the provided or lack of information provided is Mr. Dickinson continues to underestimate the number of trips generated by the proposed Hannaford project and ignores the actual trip generation rates from a nearby supermarket, and in all likelihood, Hannaford could even have a higher rate due to its demographic draw and intense advertising and weekly specials. VTrans trip generation and ITE trip generation reports state that where possible, local rates should be used. In the case of Hannaford, we know it's not possible. What are they scared of? A more detailed evaluation is presented in our August 2nd, 2018 memorandum, which has been provided to the board. Mr. Dickinson's analysis continues to underestimate the queue lengths for an existing no-build condition. If the existing traffic no-build condition analysis cannot accurately calculate the existing queues, then the levels of service and the queue lengths for build and future conditions cannot be expected to be correct. General discussions have been made regarding the alterations to Vermont 116 Commerce Street intersection, but no plans have been submitted as part of the Hannaford application. The previous plans submitted with earlier applications have design and calculation errors affecting the design of the southbound left turn lane. No truck turning analysis has been provided, which will be required as a basis of design. There has been no consideration to additional vehicle length for trucks in the Vermont 116 southbound left turn lane. The supplemental report ignores safety issues despite the affected areas having been designated high crash locations. As a matter of fact, in order to improve levels of service, in 2 locations, protected left turns are being proposed, and I guess at this point they've actually been implemented, that has a potential for more crashes since left turns will be allowed against opposing traffic. As longer queues build up, so will frustration, and drivers will take more chances, resulting in more crashes. Hannaford's own traffic consultant shows that the system is close to failure already, as Hinesburg residents are aware of in their daily travels along 116 and the existing long queues. It would be imprudent not to conduct a sensitivity analysis consisting at a minimum of analyzing different trip generation rates to see how much flexibility there is in the system. This discussion is just a summary of our August 2nd, 2018 memorandum, and details for our evaluation are in that memorandum. Thank you. And actually, I think in reading John Slason's comments, many of his comments have been included in our August 2nd memorandum.
Yeah, they parallel a lot.
I don't, and I can't remember if anybody included this, but about the takeouts for the driveways and the queues, did that ever get adjusted? We were talking about that along Commerce Street. Do they, for queues, do you take out the do not block, driveways?
Right now, it's a little unclear. They made clear that they were planning to include do not block driveways for the first 2 driveways on Commerce Street, but it wasn't clear what was going to happen with the rest. And there's some kind of squirrely information of exactly how long that queue is going to be. It looks like with takeouts for those drives, it could actually reach back to pretty close to the Hannaford driveway, Hannaford access itself. But they weren't clear about whether they intended to provide those do not block driveway segments for anything beyond the first 2 driveways on Commerce Street.
And then, did they ever give us a length of the turn lane either, along for widening the road?
Well, I think there's been some information provided, but we don't have a detailed design plan to show how it all goes together. One other issue I think that is that there was a general proposal to have a do not enter sign flash on when the queue gets big enough on Mechanicsville Road, and I'm not sure that there was really a complete analysis of Commerce Street that would include those vehicles that would
Be turning because of the sign.
be using the Commerce Street intersection as a result of either that methodology or just people diverting because they don't want to sit in a long queue at the intersection.
And I would like to point out to the board, and then potentially to have you guys weigh in. I feel like, and I do live in the development on the other side of Commerce Street, Mechanicsville. I feel like that's a major pedestrian corridor that connects two neighborhoods, Thistle Hill and Creekside, and also everyone's access to the nice path that was put along Mechanicsville that a lot of people utilize for exercise and walks. I'm concerned about the traffic non-calming of adding a lengthy turn lane, what that could do for pedestrian safety along along Commerce. So that's why I keep asking, just how long is that turn lane gonna be? Is that gonna turn that into a 3-lane highway, you know, that pedestrians?
Well, that's why we need to see the plans.
Right, I know, that's my concern as a pedestrian in town.
Right.
For Hannaford. You know, all we think about in villages is traffic calming, narrowing things up, slowing down traffic, putting things on the side of the road, and here we are wanting to widen it and make it less calm, so.
And I think everybody realizes this, we are really at the limits of the ability of Route 116 to carry the existing traffic. There's really no room for a misjudgment of either in the calculations or in the trip generation. That if you increase the trip generation, it has an impact on the system, and there's not room in the system. And I strongly believe, and I think we have evidence to prove, or I know we have evidence to prove, that Lampman's trip generation rate is more than what is being proposed in this application for of 10 average trips. And using Lampman's and the regression equation in the ITE manual, it shows that there's 85 or approximately 85 more trips. And as I indicated earlier, I think that that's still too low because Hannaford's has a big draw. And if you can come here rather than going into Burlington or the next nearest one, and again, with their marketing and with their sales brochures that they put out on a weekly basis, I think it's going to be even more than Lampman's, but at least the Lampman trip generation rate should be used.
I just wanted to respond to your question about the turn lane on Commerce Street. Well, they didn't provide any actual plans as to how this would be implemented, nor whether or not it would take out driveway pieces and so on. They said they would propose to increase the right turn lane from its current 75 feet to 270 feet.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a lot bigger, a lot longer, and there will also be taper and so on associated with that, but they're not showing anything about, there are no plans as to how any of this would actually happen.
Actually, just to do a correction. One of the plans, and I think they have several plans that show this, but it appears it's the area up to about this point on Commerce Street that they, according to their plans, that they're showing as far as a widening, which is probably about the 275 feet that you just mentioned.
Is that in front of Tailhook? I can't see. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, from about the Tailhook driveway on.
But these are pretty, excuse me,
Go ahead.
these are pretty large-scale plans. I mean, they're not what you would consider a design plan at a scale that you can really interpret what's going on. This is, to me, would be a generalized overall plan to kind of give you a concept of what's going on, but not detailed enough to make a serious evaluation of what the impacts are going to be.
Do you think that there needs to be traffic analysis along Mechanicsville as well at the intersection of Mechanicsville and Commerce? Or do you guys not anticipate that being with a no-turn lane? Do you think it could get backed up onto Mechanicsville?
the last, adding additional, with the additional traffic that I believe that's going to be coming from Mechanicsville is going to extend the queues, which means that you would need additional do not block driveways further up. And there was, and we go into that in our detailed analysis, that there was something squirrely about the calculations, because there was one point in his queue lengths that actually showed a reduction in queue lengths for the future rather than what's there now, or between a no build even and a build situation. So I'm not really sure what happened as a result of those queue lengths or how valid they are. Again, as we had indicated, that this analysis does not reflect the actual queue lengths that are existing in the field today, and then to take that model that isn't actually reflecting the queue lengths today and then applying it to the future and for a build condition, I'm not sure that I've got a lot of, I've got a concern that it won't truly reflect what the queue lengths would be.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, for example, in the extensive table of level of service or level of service results that was included in this memo, looking at Commerce Street, and this would be the left through lane, not the right turn lane, but the left through lane, the total queue length for 2019 is listed as 507 feet. And for 2024, which is supposed to have more traffic, it's listed as 427 feet. So it manages to drop roughly 90 feet, 80, 90 feet of queue, even though the delay is actually increased and the VC ratio remains essentially the same. There's obviously a problem somewhere in here that it doesn't make sense.
The software doesn't assume everybody's driving electric golf carts in 2024?
No, actually, that's one aspect of the software I know is not actually the case.
Is one of the variables from 2019 the fact that we changed the intersection at Lampman's? That seems to always be pointed at as the miraculous cure to the rolling queue and long queues that back up to CVU Road, of getting rid of that 12-second turning instead of. So what's your opinion of the change at the Lampman's intersection light that makes for simultaneous left turns from both Lampman's and Charlotte Road, and reducing that cycle time that's now separate for Charlotte Road and Lampman's?
As I understand it, and of course, none of the actual calculations and worksheets are provided, so we have to kind of infer, but it's my understanding that the flashing yellow permitted left turn has been included in all of the cycles at this point.
Yeah, so right now, Charlotte Road gets its own left turn where Lampman's is stopped, and then a cycle later, 12 seconds later, Lampman's gets its own left turn with Charlotte stopped. The proposal is to change that so they simultaneously can turn left, and they get a total, I guess, of 12 seconds to clear out both Lampman's and Charlotte Road. And that's pointed as a major improvement to the whole traffic flow through Hinesburg. I wanted to know if you had an opinion.
Well, it wouldn't. That definitely would not be reflected on the queue on Commerce Street.
No, very true, very true. I'm somewhat changing the subject.
This is one of the problems we have, is speaking to any of these questions without the provided worksheets and and background data that are associated with this. We don't really know what they did.
But by changing from a protected left turn lane, turn to a permitted turn, is you're creating a potential for more crashes. And as your queues build up and frustration builds up because of congestion, people are willing to take more risks. I'm sure you've probably all seen it where somebody will jump out and try and take a gap that they shouldn't be taken. So by changing from protected to permitted, you are improving your level of service and congestion somewhat. I'm not sure how significant it is because we don't have the sheets, but you're certainly creating a potential for more crashes.
So it was my understanding specifically for the Charlotte Road Lampman's that it would still be a protected left turn.
No, they're
It would
proposing,
just be simultaneous.
no, they're proposing to make it permitted.
Yeah, permitted.
Straight out of Landman's and potentially run into somebody who's turning left going north on
Yeah.
116.
Because I don't see the benefit in removing the protected left turn. I do see the benefit in removing the alternating left turns, but I don't see the benefit. You know,
Well, now you don't need a protected, because it's not, you don't go at the same time, so it does both.
Well, maybe this is something we should be talking with the
Yeah.
applicant.
I mean, it's still, the protected left turn says you have the right to turn. You don't have to,
But if we
Right,
gave
you
them a
turn, but
protect-
there's no opposing traffic.
Right, but if we gave
Correct.
them,
With a permitted,
yeah,
then there is
there's a
opposing traffic.
potential for.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Right,
So-
and I believe that.
If you give them protected, you're back at the
I believe
time
that was the
issue.
plan, to have it be
Okay.
permitted left turn, not protected left turn.
I did not get that. Okay.
Okay?
So if there's any other questions from the board? So I will do the same. If there's any questions from the public, specifically for Mr. Oman or Mr. Bruno?
Do we think as a board, wherever, we're gonna get to a point where we say redo the study with numbers that seem like they reflect the current situation and stop kind of going back and forth piecemeal? You know what I mean? Because we can say that now and then give them time to do that, to come back at the whatever or we can do this again and we might end up at the same place.
Maybe we can leave staff with the thought to communicate with applicants about
Right. They've given us time to think about it.
whether
so-
that should or should not be done.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just
Yeah,
keeps
sure.
pushing,
I'm
kicking the
Trying to move it
bucket.
forward as quickly as possible.
Because we could have another meeting and still come to that same
Yeah,
conclusion.
no? Hannaford wants to get the place built, though. They're not here tonight, so.
Another possibility is that you can just basically say, this is the meeting and the final meeting that you're discussing this topic, and just put them on notice on that.
Okay.
Did the other board members have a chance to review Jonathan Slason's comments?
I did, and I'm willing to punt it down the road, because the applicant's going to punt it down the road.
No, I feel like his comments are valuable and are based on a level of expertise that I don't think any of the rest of us have, except for maybe these two fellows who are experts. But I'm wondering if the rest of the board would like to convey to Hannaford that one board member's comments should be heeded and you're expecting a response.
I thought the applicant had heard that message and was
The
specifically
applicant heard the
requesting.
message that one board member felt that way. I want to know if those comments essentially speak for the
I,
full
for one,
board.
would like to hear a response to that.
Okay.
Discuss what we want to go forward with, but I think, yes, you know, in light of the discussions that you gentlemen have brought forward, and there's room to ask for some more information, some more, I don't know, properly constructed information, I think, from them. So we can talk later about what exactly we want to do. So there was, I guess, Peter had a question?
I don't really have a question for them, but I do have some comments on traffic that they want to respond to. They're sincere.
Okay, since we're talking about traffic, feel free.
Can people hear me or not?
supermarket model is changing rapidly, and I think it's very important to have the description of what you're approving traffic for very clear, so that you can't slide in with some new model and not be reviewing its impacts. They're talking about putting full-service restaurants and supermarkets now to make money. There's curbside pickup. I have no idea how that's going to change, but I just think it's really important to tie down and make them come back if there's changes in what their supermarket model is. And these are just at random. It just occurred to me that as they widen Commerce Street, you are taking away, by paving, you're taking away the root growth area for those street trees. I don't even know where they are, but I think that's something you really want to know about. You don't want to jeopardize those trees. And secondly, the same thing with snow plowing. You want to make sure that the town plows aren't, having to go so close to those trees because it's wider. In terms of the cross hatches, they're very expensive to maintain. They don't get maintained very well by the town. They're totally for the benefit of Hannaford, and I would hope that somehow they could be the responsibility of Hannaford to do it. The mobile station, when it's got its permitting, part of that, the last change there, made them do their site plans so that the furthest east driveway could be the only entrance to the mobile station, because if anybody pulls in off of 116, decides they want to use that first hash mark and it's filled and they're stubborn, you have total gridlock. You get two cars off 116 and nobody moves till that car decides to try to go down further. So it's really important that they're marked, they're maintained, and there may be reason to somehow, at some point, try to get the mobile station to eliminate that front one the way Abishans is going to do down there. The other thing is that at Silver Street right now, because the traffic is tied up in the morning, there's a zipper feed. And it works. I haven't been in since I haven't been commuting, but I'm assuming it's still there. It certainly was when I was a few years ago coming in every morning, and it worked beautifully. My understanding is once you go to a rolling queue, which is what these changes are going to do, people, and I know this, I've seen it, if the traffic is moving northbound, if it's moving, they don't let you in. It's only when it's stopped that they do a zipper feed. So this may really impact the way Silver Street feeds in. I don't know. I'm just saying that this is a dynamic that I hope gets addressed. Sorry, let me just quickly read through here. No, I guess that's pretty much it. I just think the other thing is I want to be sure that what Sarah said is that these hash marked areas are definitely taken out of queue length because it's important. Thank you.
So if there's any other public questions specifically for these folks, I don't know. Please give your name.
It's going to be a lot easier if we can let these folks have a seat and have everybody else just take a seat up there, I think.
Okay,
unless, George, you have questions specifically for Michael, and you do. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. My name George Damron, and I've lived here 30 years in the village in the house across the street, the yellow house. So I've watched the traffic quality deteriorate significantly over the last 30 years. And of course, my concern has been also not only the village, but the intersection, Charlotte Road and 116. The last 2 years, I found myself in South Burlington and Shelburne quite a bit in the late afternoon. And what I realized I needed to do was to come home actually through Charlotte Road. And it seems to me, in a project fraught with unintended consequences, that one of the major impacts is going to be longer queues along Charlotte Road as people like me realize they can go down Spear Street and take the left and come up this way and then turn right and avoid the mess that's going to be at Commerce and 116. I don't know whether you all have thought about this, and I apologize, I haven't read through the literature to see whether this is an issue that's been addressed, but it would seem to me that this is a potential problem that could get very serious with long lines of cars down Charlotte Road trying to either turn left or right. And there's no way to widen the road anymore. You cannot widen this road.
I mean, you put your finger on one of the things that's beginning to happen here, and no one has looked at this. This is a larger network problem. You can get some assistance from like regional planning. They have a model that can actually look at this. There are models that can be used to look at this at the smaller scale like this, little micro models. And in fact, one of the things that concerns us and that we didn't actually address tonight, but one of the reasons that you're having the problems that you're having in terms of looking at the queues on 116 is because of kind of a quirk of the way this analysis works. And that is that whenever we use traffic counts, we use traffic counts at the intersection that we're actually trying to serve. And 99% of the time, especially in Vermont, that's just fine because the same number of cars over a fairly short period of time are trying to get there as are actually getting there. But when you get significant congestion, as George, what was it? George mentioned, this begins to back up, and all of a sudden this begins to become a network problem because we're not actually, the input to the problem is not even the number of cars that you're trying to serve. It's the number of cars that you actually did serve, which we know is much less. And how do we know this? Because the queue is long and persistent. If there was not, if every car that was trying to get through there was getting through, there wouldn't be a queue. So whenever you have those long queues, you're not even looking at the right number unless you begin to look at this as a network problem. And I think that Jonathan did allude to this, at least in one of his comments. You may not have caught it because it was a little subtle, but basically what's happening is a lot more vehicles are trying to access the system than are even being analyzed because the queue is there and we aren't taking them into account. He mentioned needing to go to the edge of these queues to look at how many cars are trying to get in rather than just at the intersection that's actually being served. So, I mean, it is a big problem and we need to address it in some fashion.
Also, in addition, that's why you've got a 3-hour period of high traffic demand, because if it was a 1-hour peak period, after that 1 hour, basically the system would clear itself out. But it doesn't clear itself out because the demand is large enough that they build up these queues because the demand is more than that can actually be accommodated within that 1 hour period.
So just to the subject of queues. So it's my understanding, based on the applicant's traffic information that I was able to comprehend, the queue links are the cars that are not rolling. So in the case where you can't service the cars that are trying to get through, doesn't that mean more cars are no longer rolling, and therefore shouldn't that be reflected in the overall queue length?
Well, they're gonna roll when you got the green light. Otherwise, they're stopped. So, I mean,
well, I assume when they're talking about rolling queues, they're talking about the ones that are way back by NRG that are still creeping along, that are nowhere near the intersection yet, and that's why they're not included in the queue because they're rolling.
But it's still a demand volume, and if they're stopped or they're rolling, it's still the queue that may be a failure in the analysis, in that you need to. If you say you're only going to take the stopped queue, what do you do with everybody else that's kind of creeping along behind that?
Well, I mean, I thought that's why there was confusion in the traffic study when they say the queue is only 200 feet, when people look at the road and it's like, there's cars all the way back over the hill. So it looks like a big queue to me. But if the software is basically excluding cars that it considers to be rolling, then I can see why it thinks the queue's only so long.
Right, but in reality, it's it's longer. And in reality, you're going to have a longer queue probably for the left turn lane than southbound 116, because if you're only taking the stop.
Just quite a distinction and a request about that whole subject.
Okay.
So, yep.
All right. So, question up front here.
Ken Brown, I would just underline what Peter Erb and George Damron were saying, and these gentlemen were talking about. If you approve this project, you're just magnifying a project that is local now and making it regional, because the queue, the line on Silver Street is sometimes 5/10 of a mile long, waiting to get onto 116 in the mornings, and it does work like a roundabout now, because people let you in because the line on 116 is moving so slowly. But if you solve the problem up here with traffic lights and so forth, and widening Commerce Street and solve all that and speed up the line on 116, you'll be building the roundabout that Rob Bast wanted to build 15 years ago on Silver Street within 10 years.
So if there's no other questions for these gentlemen, sorry, one way in the back there, he was, because I want to let these guys sit down and then just go to the open questions.
Bob Thiefels. I may have missed this, but was it addressed that if there is a no left turn sign posted during peak hours on Mechanicsville Road onto 116, did you address that? Because traffic would have to then be diverted.
It was not, and the first time I noticed that was in your comment.
Yes. It would have to be diverted onto Commerce Street.
Yes, correct.
Because they can't turn left. And
Well, actually, I don't think it's only a left turn. It's when the queue builds up on Mechanicsville to a certain length, they would stop traffic from going onto Mechanicsville Road and divert them to Commerce Street.
well, that wasn't...
For the one option, yes.
That wasn't the best option. I think the best option, and if I'm correct, I wasn't at the select board meeting, but I think the select board okayed the positioning of a no left turn during peak hours sign at Mechanicsville Road, rather than having that other sign diverting traffic from even proceeding down Mechanicsville Road. They were diverting that traffic onto Commerce Road.
Okay.
But in any event, if there is, in any event, whether there's a no left turn sign there, or whether there's that other sign diverting traffic, all the traffic is still going to be having to be diverted onto Commerce Street if they want to go south.
That's correct.
Which a lot of people returning from Burlington, Shelburne, Williston are going to want to be going south. So I don't even think that that's even factored into any kind of traffic study at this point, because that's a new issue.
I think that's a question that Sarah was asking. Has that volume been accounted for on Commerce Street if you're going to start suddenly diverting, diverting
Actually,
people?
there is a column in the most recent applicant's analysis that does reflect that.
Okay.
We have serious questions about some of the results that are represented there, but, and that was the column that I was reading from, where in 2024, the queue length went down as opposed to going up. But there's some information, but without the backup for it, we don't really know what it is.
And then I just have one last comment. I can see if I were running a business on Commerce Street, I would welcome more traffic, but I think more traffic is going to be counterproductive in the long run, because granted, if I were coming down 116 and I wanted to go into Aubuchon Plaza there, or I wanted to go to the mobile station, I would think twice about turning left onto Commerce Street during peak hours, because I don't think I would ever get out of there. And I think that will be a concern for people. So it could be counterproductive for the businesses along there in the future. The people won't want to frequent those businesses during rush hour. And that could even be a problem for Hannaford in the long run, too. And they might end up closing their store. So those are issues I think we need to, continually be looking at as we proceed. Could I just read this very quickly? It's 2 paragraphs. It doesn't pertain necessarily to traffic, but I would like to submit it to the DRB.
Could you wait until later? There was one more question that wanted to ask about traffic, I believe. Yep.
So my name is Carol Jenkins. I just want to ask how many chances Hannaford is going to get, and it's somewhat Sarah's question, because listening to these gentlemen, it sounds like the report that they submitted has a lot of flaws. It's inadequate. They were to be here tonight, they're not, and then they'll come back the next time. And then, like Sarah was saying, how many more times? So I guess at what point do we just say, this is it, I guess that's just my question, is how much longer will this process go on?
That's sort of up to the board, and we'll discuss it, and we decide whether they asked for an extension. We don't have to give an extension. Okay, so that is stuff that we will talk about. So are the traffic questions done? Okay. One up here, and then one more in the back one.
Hi, Barbara 4-Hour, and this is something I encountered the other day. Going north on 116, I was turning left into the police station. I needed to stop because there was traffic coming south, and someone coming out of the police station who zoomed right in front of me, creating a potential hazard because cars were coming. And I know Chief Costa said that at some point that intersection will be just entry only. But that's adding to the whole mess that's going on in that intersection area too. And
so I think, that all eventually it goes back in through Farmall and out Farmall Drive, right?
I heard that they talked about that, making that one way.
So you have to go to a light in order to get out of the police station.
Which would make sense, but that needs to be considered too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And there was one more question. There we go.
Gil Coates. I had a question for the experts about traffic studies. Do they include any information about people seeking alternatives, creating traffic problems in adjacent areas?
This was very similar to one of the earlier questions that we had. This becomes this network distribution problem. Most often in these cases, we simply take the traffic volumes that we actually see at the intersections and analyze them. In this particular instance, we're beginning to see a lot of the shortcomings of that approach. So the simple answer is that traffic studies can and do that. I've done such studies myself, but this one did not, and it's usually not part of a standard traffic impact analysis, mostly because we aren't dealing with issues of this magnitude.
I suspect the further you get from the point of analysis, the harder it is to really know what you're counting. Because I asked a similar question when we first did this regarding North Road. It's like, so if you're heading south on 116 and you want to go to Bristol, why go through town if I can turn left on CV Road and wrap all the way around, go down North Road, and then get back onto 116 that way? I'm sure a lot of people do and do right now. My question was, are you counting for that? And then at the time it was like, well, we don't think that's really pertinent to this particular study.
Typically, as Michael said, when you do a traffic study, you count the traffic at the intersections that you're dealing with. And what you do is you use that same distribution of traffic in the counts that you do today. And if you project the traffic out 5 years, you use that same distribution. And as Michael indicated, in most cases, that's adequate. Mm-hmm. When you get into situations where you are approaching failure or are at failure, then people are going to start finding their own way to avoid that situation. So, and I believe in the original traffic study that was done, that's the process that they used. They just took the counts that they had and used the same distribution throughout their analysis.
All right, so if that's all the traffic questions, we'll let you guys have a, more comfortable seat. No, those aren't any more comfortable. And at this point, if there's just general questions, comments that people would like to add, okay, yes, that's right, continuation.
I know that we're speaking mostly about really technical issues, the traffic and stormwater and so on, but I don't want to lose sight of the local economy. And I just want to read a little bit about what Wendell Berry says about corporations versus the local economy. This is only 2 paragraphs, and I'd like to submit this to the DRB. Berry believes the way for people to protect themselves is by developing a local economy, beginning with the idea of a local food economy, which shortens the distance between producers and consumers to make the local economy benefit the local community, to preserve the livelihoods of local farm families and farm communities, to give consumers influence over the quality of their food, and to preserve the land. In doing so, people begin to see the difference between a local business that shares the fate of the local community and a larger absentee corporation that is set up to escape the fate of the local community ruined by corporate malfeasance. As Berry says, to be a consumer in the total economy, one must agree to be totally ignorant, totally passive, and totally dependent on distant supplies and self-interested suppliers. From the standpoint of corporations, the corporate economy brings unprecedented economic growth, but from the standpoint of the land and its local populations, a corporate economy brings destruction and slavery. Without prosperous local economies, the people have no power and the land no voice. So I think those are issues that kind of take a backdrop, but we all know what the local businesses have contributed to our community, and I don't think that the Hannaford Corporation or the Delhaize Corporation in Belgium is going to be as concerned about our local economy and our local food quality than our local people will be, our local businesses. So I...
Sure, Robbie. Thank you. So I will say our packet did contain a lot of public comment, so it's probably, if you sent something in, it's been documented, it's on record, but you're certainly welcome to...
I'll just mention that there are 4 additional ones that have been added to the Dropbox today.
Okay.
Mitch, can you rattle them off? You have them, just
Yeah.
so we have it in the record?
Sure, just give me one moment. I'll just mention, let's see, we received a letter from Carl Bowen, at N. Dunlap, a Susan Schulman, and a Mr. Handler.
Okay.
And also, we had submittals from Matthew LaPierre and Bob Thiefels, who submitted something in writing prior.
Okay.
You also have a memo from the Planning Commission.
Yes.
That should be in your packet as well.
Yeah. Okay, so if there's any other general public comments? No?
reiterate what was said before, that the fact that the applicant didn't come tonight, I mean, I think is a real slap in the face. It's terribly expensive for those of us that are concerned about Hannaford to get all these expert witnesses here. And I think it's really important for you guys to have the courage to say enough is enough. You came with an incomplete application in the beginning, and you gave them all the time for all these months to finally do what they should have done in the beginning, which was to come in with a complete application. So now they say, well, okay, we're going to bring it, and we're going to make it complete. Tonight, you'll have everything that should have been here back when this thing first opened and wasn't. And they can keep doing this forever. And I just think it's really unfair to the citizenry to keep this thing going. You should just say, at some point, you've had your chance, reapply if you want to do it again.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I guess if there's no other comments, we're going to continue the meeting to September. Oh, sorry, yes.
I'm Catherine Goldsmith. I brought my model again, in case it's a little in better shape this time. It has the back piece that's supposed to be for the park farmer's market. And I just want to say that if Hannaford's can say, well, you have everything because we gave it to you and it's on file and you can just pull it forward into the Dropbox, then I think the public can say, you received over 100 letters, and those can be just pulled forward and read, or at least gestured to from people who weren't on the board 7 years ago. Because I think a lot of very specific concerns about sidewalks and safety and lighting and dark skies and a lot of issues that we're not going to get into here tonight have been reflected in those. And for the most part, the project has not changed. The footprint hasn't changed. The site plan hasn't changed. So many of those comments are still appropriate. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. So, any other comments? Look at the whole room. Sure.
Sure. This is Jim Dumont. Mr. Acting Chairman, you had indicated there might be a vote by the board on what information you wanted, or did that vote happen? I wasn't clear on that.
We usually go into the deliberative session to figure out the additional stuff that we would like staff to ask. So it's not really a vote. It's just a discussion on what we've heard and stuff that we would, specifically like staff to follow up with the applicant. So I don't know if we'll do that tonight. I guess we'll decide. We have some other stuff that we have to look at tonight.
So I will stay. I mean, as you know, you can discuss things in deliberative session, but the actual vote needs to happen in open meeting, and I'd like to be here for that.
It's not a vote.
Right. But if you're going to give direction to your staff, that needs to happen in the open meeting. And I want to be here for that.
Well, staff could just be directions to staff, nothing specific.
We don't need to get into a debate about the meeting, the open meetings law, but any formal or informal decision of any board has to be made in open meeting. You can discuss it all you want, but if you say who wants to do this or who doesn't, that has to happen in the open meeting.
Jim, I think we know the rules.
Yeah. Okay, so I think at this point we're not closing the meeting, but suspend the meeting. Not sure what the right term is. But we will continue it to...
September 4th, is it?
September 4th? September 4th.
Typically, there's a motion to continue, second voted on, and then, but if you do want to give us some direction, you could do that now and then continue it after that. It's up to you, Dick, how you want to proceed. Okay. But I think the last time we did this in terms of direction to the applicant, you did it at the very end of the meeting. It was in the bright light of day. It was recorded on VCAM. But if you're planning to do that again, might as well just do it now. And then we can move on to Frost Beer Works. That's the only thing left, right?
That's it, I believe, yes. So fine, let's, if you have...
I'm not going to consider any submission from the application on stormwater unless they persuade me in writing why I should, because they forfeited their opportunity to address that issue tonight. I'll consider everything they've submitted up until now, but I'm not going to consider anything going forward. And if they want to address that, they're on notice that they can.
Is the rest of the board on the same page? Do you want us to convey that as a board direction, or just as one board member's concern about their lack of appearance tonight?
I would say I'm not on that same page.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not happy they didn't show up to discuss other topics, but the topics still need to be discussed. So,
what else would you like us to convey? I do have notes on specific questions that both Dick and Sarah asked, as well as your concurrence on Jonathan Slason's questions. Anything else you want us to highlight for them? They did receive the staff report, so to the extent to which there are items or questions or concerns raised in the staff report that you either agree with or just want to let ride, they're aware of those.
I had a couple of comments to the staff report. One being the adequacy of what I underlined was that the applicant has submitted testimony from a licensed engineer that the proposed stormwater system was designed for the state's 2002 standards and would also meet the state's 2017 standards. I had the conclusion from previous meetings that it would not meet the state's 2017 standards, but
I think the intent of that was the applicant's claim,
Okay.
not necessarily staff's claim.
Okay.
Yeah, but Ted, we tried to make it clear in the staff report that per the April initial memo, which highlighted a whole host of concerns with the stormwater plan, that we still think that it's problematic and likely doesn't comply with the 2017 standard. But Mitch is right. The most recent submittal you got from Paul O'Leary, which was in the earlier July, included a comment that he felt it would meet the 2017 standard.
And to, just simply adding to that, what we were trying to do with the staff report is we're trying to bring some closure to this hearing. So we tried to bring up all of everything that was mentioned, stated. Here's all the different arguments. Here's where we seem to be right now. So you as a board could say, well, one, we're putting it out there, so if we've missed something, please add to it. But the main thing is, you as a board, here's the information. What additional information do you need to feel like that the hearing aspect of this is complete?
Yeah, right. No, it was well organized. I appreciated it, actually. Yeah.
So I guess the question that has come out of this is just a more, I don't know, more complete traffic design. I mean, show the engineering drawings. I mean, it seems like in other places they've actually had to, show the lane, show, right down to little turn arrows on the pavement. That, all seems to be missing.
Or even just simply responding to all the, the Bruno Oman report, responding to John Slason's report, putting something that's so comprehensive that really addresses all of this.
Well,
that it's
modeling isn't matching up
and this is an application, so they need to otherwise I don't know how you can vote on an incomplete application. So
I think we got to make sure we don't confuse. You can have a complete application that might not be an approvable application. So you can have an application that you can look at that's technically complete, but there are issues with it that are not resolved, which may not make it approvable. And I think there's a distinction between those two. So
okay.
I would say they haven't addressed the concerns that have been raised.
So yes, I guess that would be something that I would ask, is not just John's questions, but to be sure to address questions that were raised by the experts today. and also related to stormwater, at least from my opinion. So,
Yeah, I haven't heard a good explanation of, and testimony as to why they think it meets the 2017 standards. My conclusion from previous testimony was that it probably did not.
They haven't addressed the low-impact design standards that we have in our regs, and there's even questions whether they even meet, from the testimony you heard today, whether they even meet the 2002 standards.
Give you that.
okay.
With a clear plan on how they would do that, and if they really could get the waivers, and if they really can use the existing filtration to meet.
Okay.
That's
Guess
what
I can't
the
think of anything else
applicant on there-
from today.
And there's actually testified to, and you heard testimony today that that no longer applies.
Pardon me, because I didn't hear what you said.
Okay. The applicant in their write-up, the applicant's engineer in their write-up addressed it and basically was the opinion that it does meet that, where you heard testimony today that
Well,
contradicts
even
it.
in the applicant's testimony, it was fairly vague. I felt like, especially in the maybe sort of, we've seen it happen before, especially on the underground, being able to filter.
Right. There's a lot of questions that have been brought to their attention, and if they're going to come back and discuss stormwater, they should address those.
Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like staff to?
I'd like it to be very clear that for both parties, when something's brought up, it's section 3.2.4, I disagree with, and then the other party has to say, according to what I understand, this is how we're meeting it. And I think it needs to be very clear from Hannaford's as well as anybody addressing an issue. Otherwise, how do we know what they're really trying to answer? I think it has to be very clear.
Bottom line is we answer to the regs, right? Yeah. Okay.
Those references in as best we can.
No, I understand that, but I think the parties at hand have to do the same as well.
Okay. So I guess that's it. So at this point, okay. I guess I would make a motion to continue the hearing to September 4th. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. All right. So thank you very much for coming on a hot night. And we do have a little more business to do, so if you want to chat, if you could do that out, that would be good. All right. So our last item for today is the Frost application. It's gone through a couple revisions.
Yeah, this was pretty straightforward. You gave Mitch direction at the last meeting to make revisions. I think he provided you with, you provided them with a clean version and an edited version, so it's just a matter of, did he nail it, or is there anything else you want changed? And then we can adjourn to the cool night air.
I just want to state, just for the record, I did get responses from Dennis and from Ralph and from Greg saying that they were approving it as written. Dick, I believe you had a comment.
I can.
Yeah. Correct.
Just slight corrections here. Number 6 in the findings of fact. Thank you. It's okay, it's okay. The applicant are estimating 30 to 56 customers per day when the tasting room and food truck are open and available. Add the word when. There's a per day the tasting room. Per day when the tasting room is open.
Okay. So add the word when.
And number 5 on the order, just not to put it too, it sounds a little bit too much that you will receive approval of them. So I would reword number 5 at the end to say, and obtain approval of them from the DRB.
Where are you?
I'm number 5 on the order.
And just obtain DRB approval?
Sure, that's fine too.
And then as far as under conclusions, we're not the ones that, that we don't determine it's the 6 seats, right? It doesn't require, do we want them to come back to us for review for expansion of seating of the 6 seats that are attached to the tasting room? Because I thought that was.
Which conclusion?
Now this is conclusion 5.
5.
Well, I thought we still originally approved, I mean, aside from
Right.
the board or whatever.
The answer is yes, if they go
We
back
still
beyond
approved
6, they need to
seating
come back again, yep.
for when they first opened the tasting room.
Okay.
Yeah, that was their proposal and we approved it.
Okay.
It doesn't have to match what the state or whatever body it is approves, but.
I mean, it's the least of either. I mean, if the state does something less, then they have to abide by that. If the state does something more, then they have to abide by the limitations of the town. Yeah. And also, they could get approval for more seating than they actually use. It just gives them the option in the future if they wanted to expand.
Right, so just like we can give them more seating, but if the state only says they can have 6 seats for people drinking beer, that's all they can have for people drinking beer.
The only thing town-wise is that if you start adding more seats, you then have to think of the customers and the parking and so forth. It works for what's been proposed.
Okay. So the question that I had was mainly regarding their parking lot and whether or not, whether or not they should be storing stuff in their parking lot or leaving it open for parking. And when things are under construction, I understand that stuff's temporary, but they have the back end of a truck that's been sitting in their parking lot for, I mean, basically they shouldn't be storing stuff in their parking lot. And what I don't want to, I'd prefer, and maybe it's not part of this, but I prefer it not turn into, something like where Barnett, they used a tractor trailer, and after 30 years, it just became a part of the site. So normally we would have to apply, or we'd have to prove an external structure for storage. Nothing has been approved in that regard. So for 2 reasons, that because there's nothing approved for, storing stuff out in the parking lot, and 2, that they're going to need the parking that they've got. I was wondering if it would make sense to, add an additional conclusion or order that I don't even know how you'd word it, but basically the parking lot can't be used for storage.
And number 4 is the parking on the property shall be limited to the parking area, and the parking area shall be kept clear for,
Kept clear for parking.
Yeah, kept clear for parking.
Well, is it like stuff that they use daily to deliver their beer around? I mean, they deliver a lot of kegs. I mean, is that like the trailers they use to deliver, do you think, that they're just parking
Well,
there?
it's not even on wheels.
Oh, okay, never mind.
So
Probably not.
I don't even know if it's theirs. But I just want to be careful about, and whether it's, like the big plastic containers for storing liquids, if they start storing those out in the parking lot just because they don't want to take up floor space inside. I don't want the parking lot to become a storage facility, especially if they're going to need the parking.
Then could you simply say the parking lot is meant for registered vehicles only?
There you go.
And that kind of,
Because even trailers
if
are
that's your
registered.
point?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think some
it's
kind of
appropriate.
wording about the parking lot is designed for parking of vehicles and not for storage of equipment or other structures might do the trick registered vehicles, you could get around that, but.
It's not just the parking lot. We don't want exterior storage of materials.
Right, I'm just trying to speak to
Yeah.
Dick's specific concern about the available parking. I will tell you that I think
Well,
that from an
that's true.
enforcement angle, our zoning administrator, regardless of whether you add this condition or not, has the power to approach a business owner and say.
That's a good point.
You're impinging on your own parking lot, you need to fix that, or explain to me why you aren't, you know what I mean? I think we have
it's
that
not,
power.
you haven't been approved for outdoor storage, so we,
Right.
So therefore, that thing, it's been sitting there for 4 years, maybe it's time to get rid of it. So that's fine, that's fine. I mean, it's a zoning administrator enforceable item, it doesn't really have to be.
Yeah, and I think we could even give our ZA heads up, later this week, just to say, hey, this all got approved, everyone's happy, everyone loves Frost beer, but there was, mention made of semi-permanent structures in the parking area, could you keep track of that? She's fairly good at that once
Okay,
apprised.
That's fine by me, okay.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So that was an aye for everybody? Aye for an aye?
Aye for aye. Aye.
All right.
Any other business?
Well, that's true, yeah. New business.
The next meeting, mention that you have the church lighting that was postponed due to a scheduling conflict that they had. And we're also going to provide some training on the new regulations, as well as lighting, and just different.
I will not be here on the 21st.
Can I get a hard copy of the regulations next time? I'll just get it next time, Alex. I'm not going to read it between now and then. Rest assured.
Okay,
So what was the last thing you said, as well as lighting?
lighting, yes, just some, there are,
The new regulations include a whole new section on outdoor lighting. So
Okay.
part of the training will be in the meeting room downstairs, and then once it gets dark, we're going to walk over to Bristol Bakery area and take a look at an actual lighting plan and what it looks like on the ground. So we can learn a little bit about how to implement that new section.
Okay.
And then we'll be released from there.
Correct.
So should I walk here that night?
You should always walk here, Sarah. I know where you live.
Good night,
So-
gentlemen. Consider that a motion.
Yeah.
Very good. So I guess we shall close our meeting. Thank you.